A single hull dropped out of the dark above Selvoreth. No running lights, no standard transponder, no emissions for the Hurled tactical grid to catch. The orbital platform saw nothing, just a patch of empty space that started moving. Then the drones deployed and the math of the siege changed. 400 of them erupted from the ship's flanks like a silent shrapnel field, each one spinning into a pattern no Hurled computer could parse. 47 years of simulated engagements had been poured into their flight paths. They split into 4 formations of 100. The first wave struck the particle beam emitters, cutting their power feeds with surgical precision. The second wave collapsed the orbital rails that had been dropping kinetic rods for 4 days. The third wave jammed every command relay between the ships, and the fourth wave simply waited. They did not attack the ships. They attacked the siege infrastructure itself. In under a minute, 3 Hurled siege ships lost their main arrays. The other 5 went dark, their weapon grids intact but blind. The fire from the sky stopped. 11 minutes after arrival, a whisper came through the jamming signal. 5 words, spoken in a voice so quiet it barely registered on the Hurled speakers. "We don't send aid, we send consequences." The Consequence-class vessel hung in the debris field. No claim of victory, no demand for surrender, just a single hull of dark metal waiting in the silence it had created. Vexkor, the Hurled fleet commander, stared at his display for a long moment. He had seen the drones move. He had seen them cut the infrastructure of his siege ship by ship without ever targeting a single crew compartment. The pattern was not random, it was corrective. It was a lesson. He ordered withdrawal. He did not call it defeat, he called it a reclassification. On Selvoreth, 42,000 civilians looked up at a sky that had stopped burning. None of them knew who had come. None of them knew that the ship had launched from Jupiter's 67th moon, or that the woman who authorized it had not spoken above a whisper in 11 years. She was still sitting in the Galactic Concord Security Council chamber, light years away. Her silver ring caught the blue shift of the emergency lighting. The band was warm against her skin, worn smooth by 11 years of thumbing. She had not stood up. She had not raised her voice. She had simply typed a single word into a secure feed. Acknowledged. That was the first time anyone in the Concord had heard it. The second time would be hours later, when the casualty report landed on the crystal ceiling display. But that comes later. You'll want to hear how it started, trust me on that. 61 hours before the Consequence dropped, the chamber of the Security Council stank of recycled ozone and political patience. 9 species circled the curved table, each of them older than human spaceflight. Fleet Commander Druath Salkai stood in the center, his hammered bronze armor catching the cold starlight from the crystal ceiling. His bronze plate had 3 dents in it, minor corrections from campaigns where he had been wrong, though he never admitted it. His scaled arms were folded behind his back. He was on his 7th petition. "The nearest qualified fleet is 18 cycles away," he said, his voice carrying no doubt. "The nearest unqualified fleet is 4 hours from the distress beacon. They will send a cargo ship with medical supplies and call it a fleet." A ripple of dry laughter moved through the chamber. Druath did not laugh. He simply filed the petition and waited for the vote. In the observer gallery above, Ambassador Kalith Voss did not laugh either. She watched. She had watched for 11 years. Her hands rested on the railing, unmoving, patient, folded as if in prayer. The silver ring on her right hand caught the light. Elder Thessaly, a Valith of 612 years, raised a frail hand from the council floor. "If we override them, we must accept the consequence. They will not forget." Druath waved the concern away. "They will obey. They are human." Kalith reached into her coat pocket and removed a small white card. She wrote a single word on it with a stylus. "Noted." She placed the card face up on the railing and did not speak. Beside her, Captain Iris Van leaned in. His species had run trade routes across the human border for 23 years. He knew what human ships looked like when they were not pretending. "They are going to override us," he whispered. "They have the votes." Caliph did not turn. "Let them. They will send the cargo ship anyway. The Realoi will destroy it, and then the council will call it a human failure." She touched her ring. "I know." Behind her, unknown to the council, a secondary feed pulsed on a secure channel. 12,847 distress signals. That was the number logged in the first 3 days of the Resonance Protocol's operation, 47 years ago. The Galactic Concord did not know the array existed. It orbited a dead neutron star, its dishes aimed at the dark between systems. It had never been about listening. It had been about learning the shape of galactic suffering, so that one day, when the signal matched the pattern, the answer would not be aid. The answer would be architecture. The feed pulsed again. Caliph saw it on her display. The Realoi siege fleet had finalized its approach vector to Selvorath. Shields at a third. 42,000 civilians huddled in the lower shelters. She touched the silver ring. Her daughter Ren was in those shelters. She folded the small card and returned it to her pocket. She straightened her coat. Her fingers brushed the stylus once, twice, a third time, a nervous habit she had carried from her first year in service, back when she had been too young to hold a pen steady. Then she pressed her thumb to the corner of her display. The secure feed opened. She typed a message, letter by letter, her whisper voice silent as it always was. "Protocol Lambda 7, Pale Witness confirms. Send the consequence." She did not say please, she did not say authorize, she did not say help. She sent the message and turned her display off. In the chamber below, Drueth Salkai was still talking. He was discussing timelines, reinforcement schedules, the bureaucratic procedure for overriding human fleets. He had no idea that 400 drones were already spinning up their navigation nodes in the shadow of Jupiter's 67th moon. He had no idea that the crew of 32 had not slept in a full day and had not complained once. He had no idea that the ship's hull was already gone. On the resonance array, a single dish tilted a degree to the left. The data burst from Caliph's feed hit the receiver and was reflected into the dark. It took 3 microseconds to cross the distance to the shipyard. The gravity tractor read the command and released the docking clamps. Caliph stood up. She did not speak. She walked to the stairwell at the back of the gallery, her footsteps silent on the pale stone. She did not look back at the council. She did not need to. The consequence was already in transit. The hull had crossed the system boundary before the first council member finished his sentence. The drones were already spinning. And somewhere in the dark between stars, a long hull of metal and patience was preparing to answer a call the galaxy did not know it had made. The bridge of the asterisk consequence hummed. Not a loud hum, the engines were too quiet for that. It was the deep vibration of gravity drives bending space around a hull that weighed more than a city block. Commander Aris stood at the tactical display, her palms flat on its cold edge. She had not slept in a full day. Neither had the other 31 people on board. No one spoke about it. They had left the shadow of the gas giant 4 hours ago. The ship's reactor pulsed at a steady rhythm, feeding power to the drone bays. 400 autonomous units sat in their racks, each one carrying 12,000 hours of simulated combat data. The simulations had run for 47 years, updated with every distress signal the Resonance Protocol had logged. The crew did not know the exact shape of the target ahead, but the drones did. Aris traced a finger across the display. The course was locked. Selvorath sat ahead, its orbital ring glowing red on the threat board. She did not ask why they were going. She had read the brief. Ambassador Voss had sent the order. That was enough. "Drone bays ready," a voice said from the pit below. "Navigation nodes calibrated." Aris nodded. "Maintain silence. No emissions until we cross the outer marker." The bridge went back to its quiet rhythm. No one checked the time. They had learned to measure only the distance. 60 hours before the asterisk consequence crossed the outer marker, the Galactic Concord Security Council cast its final vote. The numbers were not close. 17 species abstained, 9 voted to override, and the rest simply let the vote pass without raising a hand. Druoth Salkai stood at the center of the chamber, his bronze armor gleaming under the crystal ceiling. His scaled arms were unfolded now, and his fists pressed against the table. "The resolution passes," the presiding officer announced. "The Human Diplomatic Corps will receive a formal notification. Their ships are to remain in designated trade lanes until the nearest qualified fleet arrives." Druoth allowed himself a slow blink of satisfaction. "And the cargo ship they inevitably send? We will designate it non-combatant. The Realoi will be informed." Druoth turned toward the observer gallery. Kalith Voss was not there. The chair where she had sat was empty. On the railing where the small white card had rested, there was nothing. Elder Thessaly rose from her seat. The Valith's voice was thin, but it carried. "You are making a mistake." Druoth did not bother to turn. The Valith have been making that argument for 300 years. The humans are not a threat. They are a bureaucratic inconvenience. Thessaly's small hands clasped together. "They do not send aid the way we do. They never have. I have the records. I have watched them." Druoth finally turned. "What records?" Thessaly did not answer. She walked toward the chamber's exit, her frail frame moving with the careful pace of someone who had seen too many mistakes to hurry. She intended to reach her private terminal before the human ship arrived. She was already too late. Thessaly's chambers were quiet. She sat at a stone desk that had belonged to her predecessor, her display showing a file marked *Terran Historical Engagement, unclassified. She had not opened this file in 200 years. She did not want to open it now, but her fingers moved across the surface, pulling up the oldest entry. It was a colonial dispute. A settlement had called for help against a localized fleet. The response had arrived in 10 hours. The ship had not carried medicine or food. It had carried a single message. "We have arrived. State your terms." The attacking fleet had retreated without a shot fired. Thessaly scrolled. The pattern repeated: a harvest world under siege, a station blockaded, a convoy lost. Every time the human response had arrived faster than the assessment could finish. Not once had the humans asked for permission. Not once had they waited for a vote. She pulled up the most recent entry. It was dated 17 cycles ago. A human merchant vessel had been boarded by Vrethkai customs officers. The customs officers had been returned to their station unharmed, but their ship's logs had been completely overwritten with a single sentence: "We are not cargo." Thessaly closed the file. She had seen the pattern. The humans had spent their whole existence on a world that tried to kill them, and they had survived by learning two things: how to wait and how to hit exactly once. The Conquered thought they were sending medical supplies. The Valith elder knew they were not. She opened a secure channel to the council floor. "I need to speak with Fleet Commander Druoth Salkai, immediately." The consequence crossed the system boundary 90 seconds later. The ship's hull remained dark. Its transponder was silent. The Realoi siege platforms had been designed to detect capital ships, supply convoys, and rescue fleets. They were not designed to detect a shape that moved like debris but held the mass of a small moon. Vexkor sat in his command chair on the lead siege ship. His 6 limbs rested on the armrests. His tactical display showed the Selvoreth atmosphere, the orbital rails, the shield generator below. Everything was proceeding according to the schedule. The shield was down to 34%. The bombardment would finish in 8 more hours. "Sensor anomaly," a crew member announced. "Outer system, track is intermittent." Vexkor looked at the display. A small dot appeared, blinked twice, then disappeared. "Debris," he said. "It does not match debris patterns." Then it is a broken cargo drone. The humans have been sending them for weeks. Ignore it. The crew member returned to their post. Vexcor turned back to the bombardment schedule. He did not see the dot reappear. He did not notice that it had tripled in size in the last 12 seconds. By the time he looked up again, the consequence was already in orbit. On Selvoreth, a girl named Wren sat in the lower shelter's corner, her hands wrapped around her knees. She was 14 years old. She had been in this shelter for 4 days. The walls were damp, and the air tasted like dust and recycled oxygen. Her mother had left her here 11 years ago when she was 3 and had promised to come back. Wren had stopped expecting it. She looked up at the sky portal, a small screen showing a camera feed from the surface. The sky was still full of falling light, but something had changed. The light was stopping. One by one, the streaks above the shield flickered and died. She pressed her face closer to the screen. There was a shape up there, dark, long, unmoving. It had not been there a minute ago. "Mom," she whispered. The shape did not answer. The bombardment stopped completely 7 seconds later. The Consequence deployed its drones at a range of 400 kilometers. Commander Aris gave the order without raising her voice. "Launch!" The drone bays opened, and the racks disgorged their payloads. 400 units, each one the size of a transport pod, dropped into the void and spun into formation. They did not accelerate aggressively. They moved with the precision of a math equation solving itself. The first wave struck the particle beam emitters. The drones did not explode. They did not ram. They extended a single filament each, touched a specific junction on the emitter's housing, and delivered an electrical pulse designed to overload a single circuit. The emitters did not detonate. They simply stopped feeding power. The second wave collapsed the orbital rails. The drones did this by flying through the rail's structural seams and depositing a chemical compound that expanded and fractured the metal from the inside. The rails broke apart in a silent cascade of debris, dropping the kinetic rods into the atmosphere below. They burned up harmlessly, their guidance systems dead. The third wave jammed every command relay between the ships. The drones broadcast a patterned interference that the Hurled had never encountered. It did not erase the signals. It inserted false data into every single packet. The ships could still hear each other. They just could not trust anything they heard. The fourth wave waited. Vexcor stared at his screen. The orbital rails had fallen. The particle beam was offline. His command relays were returning garbage data. He opened a channel to the fleet. "Report." Silence, then static, then a single clear voice so soft it was almost inaudible. "We don't send aid, we send consequences." Vexcor looked at the sensor display. The dark shape was still there. Its drones were everywhere, but they had not attacked his ships. Not a single crew compartment had been breached. His ships were intact, but they were blind, unarmed, and useless. He sat in his chair for 47 seconds. Then he ordered withdrawal. Back in the council chamber, Druath Salkai was reading the casualty report. It had been delivered to his personal display. The numbers were simple: 0 civilian deaths on Selvoreth, 0 Hurled ships destroyed, 100% of siege infrastructure eliminated, 1 human vessel, 32 crew. He read them again. He thought about his petition. He thought about his words. A cargo ship with medical supplies. He pressed his palms flat on the table and waited for the chamber to finish gasping. "I want a full explanation," he said. His voice cracked slightly. "Where did that ship come from?" The presiding officer opened a channel to the observer gallery. "Ambassador Voss, please report to the floor." The gallery was empty. The chair was still empty. The small card was gone. A side door opened. Kalith Voss stepped onto the chamber floor. Her silver ring caught the blue haze of the emergency lighting. She walked to the center of the room, stopped, and folded her arms. She did not speak. Druath leaned forward. "Ambassador." What have you done? Caliph looked at him. Her whisper voice was barely a murmur. The council asked for the nearest fleet. We asked for qualified assistance. We did not ask for, he gestured at the report, for this. You asked for help, she touched her ring. I sent the nearest fleet. They are not qualified, they never claimed to be, they are just willing. The chamber fell silent. Druoth stared at her. He had never heard her say more than 3 words together. He had assumed she was deferential. He had assumed she was weak. Caliph turned. She walked toward the side door. At the threshold she paused. The bombardment has stopped. 42,000 people are alive. That is what you asked for. That is what you got. She left without looking back. The ship was still there. The Consequence hung in the dark above Selvorath, its drones returning to their bays one by one. Commander Aris watched the recovery count tick upward. 398, 399, 400. She nodded once and turned away from the display. On the planet below, the shelters opened. Civilians walked into the light of a sky that no longer burned. A girl named Wren stepped onto the surface, her eyes scanning the dust and the smoke. She did not see her mother. She saw a distant shape in the orbit. She touched her chest, where a small silver pendant hung, a piece of the ring her mother had worn. In the council chamber, Thessaly sat alone at her desk. She had watched the recording 3 times. She paused it at the moment the drones deployed. The pattern was the same. It was always the same. The humans waited until the math was perfect. Then they struck exactly once. They had spent 47 years building a single response. She looked down at the old file on her display. The words sat at the bottom of the screen. We are not cargo. She closed it and sat in the dark. The galaxy had just been given a new word for what a Deathworlder could do when it finally answered the phone. The asterisk Consequence sensor officer looked up from her display. New contact, 2 light seconds out. Warp signature matches Vrethkai design. Flagship configuration. Commander Aris turned from the tactical display. How long? 18 minutes, give or take. They're not hiding. Aris touched the comm panel. Get me Ambassador Voss, now. The council chamber had not emptied. Druoth Salkai still stood at the center, his fists pressed into the stone table. His scaled arms trembled slightly, not from fear, from the effort of not striking something. The presiding officer had called for a recess, but no one had moved. Where is she? Druoth's voice cut through the murmuring. That human ambassador. She left the chamber, but she cannot leave the station. Find her. A side door opened. Caliph Voss walked in again, her steps measured, her silver ring glinting. She stopped at the same spot as before. The chamber went quiet. Druoth pointed a clawed finger at her. You violated every protocol. You launched a military strike without council authorization. I launched nothing, Caliph's whisper carried. I sent a message. The ship that responded was already in motion. The crew made their own choices. You are their ambassador. You bear responsibility. I bear the consequence. She touched her ring. And I bear the fact that 42,000 people are alive because I did not wait for this body to finish its vote. The presiding officer raised a hand. Ambassador Voss, you are ordered to surrender your credentials. You will face a disciplinary hearing. Your ship. My ship has already left. Caliph paused. Or it is still there. I do not know. I do not control it. The chamber erupted into overlapping voices. Druoth slammed his fist on the table. The crack echoed off the crystal ceiling. Enough! I have filed 7 petitions against your species. I have watched you defer, apologize, and shrink from every confrontation. I have never seen you strike first. Why now? Caliph looked at him. Because you weren't watching the right thing. Thessaly rose from her seat. Her small frame was barely visible behind the table, but her voice cut through the noise. I have watched the humans for 200 years. I have their records. I know their pattern. Druoth turned. Elder, this is not the time for history lessons. It is exactly the time. Thessaly walked to the center of the floor. The first human distress response I recorded was a colony dispute. The second was a convoy rescue. The third was a station liberation. In every single case, the humans arrived faster than the council could deliberate. In every single case, they struck exactly once, and they did not destroy the enemy. They destroyed the enemy's ability to fight. That is the pattern. She pulled up a display from her wrist. The old files appeared on the chamber's central projection. You call them unqualified, you call them primitives, but they have spent 47 years building a listening array that tracks every distress signal in the galaxy. They have recorded every species' tactics, every weakness, every operational pattern. They did not build it to save lives. They built it to know exactly where to hit, when to hit, and how to hit once. Drueth's scales rippled. That is not possible. No single species could. One species did. Thessaly turned to Caliph. I knew about the resonance protocol. I did not tell the council. I believed it was harmless. I was wrong. Caliph met her gaze. You were not wrong. It was harmless until it wasn't. On the Consequence Bridge, the sensor officer tracked the Vrethkai flagship. Range closing, 8 minutes. They have not hailed. Commander Aris kept her eyes on the display. Maintain silence. Do not power weapons. Do not raise shields. Let them see us as a ghost. They will fire on us. No, they won't. Aris touched the comm again. Patch me through to the ambassador's personal channel. I need to know if she wants us to stay or leave. The channel opened. Caliph's voice came through, barely audible. Commander. You are clear to remain, but do not engage unless I give the order. Understood. Aris closed the channel. She did not ask what the order would be. She had been trained to trust the silence. The Vrethkai flagship dropped out of warp at the edge of Selvoreth's orbit. It was massive, a battle carrier with enough firepower to level the planet's surface twice over. Its commander was not Drueth Salkai. It was a younger admiral, a subordinate who had been sent to investigate the loss of siege capability. The admiral scanned the system. He saw the debris of the orbital rails, the flickering emitters, the dark shape of the asterisk Consequence sitting motionless. He opened a channel. Unidentified vessel. Identify yourself and state your purpose. The Consequence did not respond. The admiral opened a private channel to Drueth. Fleet Commander, we have arrived. The human ship is still present. Do we engage? Drueth stood in the council chamber, his display showing the feed from his flagship. He looked at the dark hull, the shape that had humiliated him. He thought about his 7 petitions. He thought about the word unqualified. He thought about the 6 words Caliph had said, because you weren't watching the right thing. He closed his eyes for a moment, then he opened them. Hold position, do not fire, I will contact you with further orders. The admiral acknowledged and cut the channel. Thessaly walked to Caliph. You know what they will do. They will demand your removal. They will sanction your species. They will try to dismantle the protocol. Caliph did not move. They can try. The humans cannot face the full Vrethkai fleet. Not alone. The Dominion has hundreds of ships. They won't need to face them. Caliph touched her ring again. They only need to face the ones that come, and they have been watching them for 47 years. Thessaly understood. The humans had not built a ship. They had built a system. The Consequence was one component. The drones were another. The resonance protocol was the third, and somewhere in the dark between stars there were more components waiting for the signal. She looked at Caliph. What else have you built? Caliph did not answer. She simply turned toward the chamber's exit. At the threshold, she paused. The galaxy wanted to know what a Deathworlder would do when asked for help. Now you know. She walked out into the corridor. The door closed behind her. On Selvoreth, Ren Voss stood in the open air, looking up at the dark shape in the sky. She had been told that the bombardment had stopped. She had been told that someone had come to save them. She did not know who. She had not seen her mother in 11 years. A woman in a relief uniform approached her. "Are you Ren Voss?" Ren nodded. "Your mother sent a message. She says she will come for you soon. She says to wait for the signal." Ren touched her silver pendant. "What signal?" "I don't know. She just said you would know it when you saw it." Ren looked back at the sky. The dark shape was still there. She wondered what kind of signal her mother would send. She had no idea that the signal was already on its way. A single drone, detaching from the Consequence *S flank, carrying a small package wrapped in white cloth. The drone would take 4 hours to reach the surface. It would land beside Ren while she slept. Inside the package would be a small card. On the card, one word: noted. The council chamber had not reconvened. Druoth Salkai had retreated to his private quarters. He sat in his armor staring at the casualty report on his display. He had read it 18 times. The numbers did not change. 00, 100, 132. He thought about Calith's whisper. He thought about the way she had touched her ring. He opened a new file. He began to type a petition. It would be his 8th. But this time he did not know what to write. He could not call her unqualified. He could not claim the humans were weak. He had the evidence in front of him. He deleted the file and sat in silence. The bronze armor felt heavier than it had an hour ago. He had been wrong. He had been wrong for 287 years. He did not laugh. He did not speak. He simply sat, and the weight of the galaxy's new word pressed down on his shoulders. The Consequence held its position. The Vrethkai flagship did not move. Neither ship fired, neither ship hailed. The silence stretched. Commander Aris watched the display. The drone had been dispatched. She had not asked what was in the package. She had simply ordered the launch. Calith's message had been clear: send the signal. She touched the tactical display. The drone's path was clear. 4 hours. Then Ren would have the card, and Calith would have what she had been waiting for. But something else was coming. Aris saw it on the long-range sensors. A second warp signature, large, slower, but unmistakable. It was not Vrethkai. It was not Realoi. It was something new. Something that had been watching the system for a long time. She pulled up the identification. The registry came back as *Pale Witness*, a merchant freighter, but its transponder had been modified. It was the same ship that had confirmed the Realoi's position to Calith. It had been at the edge of the system, recording everything. Aris opened a channel. "Pale Witness, this is the Consequence. State your purpose." A voice answered, calm, old human. "We are the observers. We have been here for 4 decades. We saw the first distress signal. We saw the last. We are here to record the Consequence." Aris closed the channel. She did not ask who they were. She already knew. They were the ones who had built the protocol. They were the ones who had waited 47 years to see it used. She looked at the display. The drone was descending. The Vrethkai flagship was still. The *Pale Witness was recording. And somewhere in the council chamber, a tired admiral was beginning to understand that the galaxy had just entered a new era. The war was not over. It had not even started. The humans had just shown the first move. The rest of the board was still dark. Druoth Salkai sat alone for a long time. He had not moved from his seat. He had not filed a petition. He had not called his flagship. He simply sat, his armor cold against his scales, and thought about what it meant to measure the wrong thing. He had measured ships and armies and years of conquest. The humans had measured patience. They had measured the exact shape of galactic suffering. And when the time came, they had used that measurement to solve a siege without firing a single shot at a crew. He looked at his display. The casualty report was still there. He scrolled down. At the bottom, in small text, was a note. "The resonance protocol continues listening. The count is higher now." He closed the report. He did not ask what the count was. He did not want to know. He had already learned enough about what it meant to be wrong. He stood up. He walked to the window. Outside, the cold stars shone. He thought about the dark hull above Selvoreth. He thought about the drones that had moved like math. He thought about the woman who had spoken in a whisper for 11 years. He had been wrong. He would live with that. But he also knew that the galaxy would not forget. The word had been delivered. The consequence had been demonstrated. And somewhere in the dark, the humans were still listening. The comm channel opened. Fleet Commander Salkai, the Admiral is requesting final orders. He has a firing solution on the human vessel. He needs a decision. Drueth stood at the window, his reflection ghosting against the cold stars. He had not moved from that spot in 30 minutes. His bronze armor had cooled to the temperature of the room. The dents in his plate, 3 of them, from 3 campaigns where he had been wrong, suddenly felt like accusations. He reached for the cup of water on the side table. He lifted it to his lips, felt the cool ceramic against his scales, and set it down without drinking. The motion was ordinary, automatic, the kind of thing a commander did while thinking about the next campaign. But there was no next campaign. There was only this moment and the choice that had already been made for him. He opened the channel. Do not fire. Withdraw to the outer system and hold position. I will contact the Council before any further action. The Admiral's voice carried surprise. Fleet Commander. The ship is vulnerable. A single volley. A single volley will not solve anything. Drueth's voice was flat. That ship did not fire on our siege platforms. It dismantled them. It did not kill a single crew member. It demonstrated that it could have killed every single one of us, and it chose not to. That is not weakness. That is a lesson. The Admiral paused, understood, withdrawing. The channel closed. Drueth sat down. The weight of the armor was no longer heavy. It was simply there, a shell around a shell. He had spent 287 years believing that strength was measured in campaigns won. He had never considered that strength might be measured in campaigns not fought. He opened a new file. He began to type. This time he did not delete it. It was not a petition. It was a resignation. The consequence held its position. Commander Aris watched the Vrethkai flagship turn and retreat to the outer system. She did not exhale. She did not celebrate. She simply marked the event in the log and turned to the secondary display. The drone had reached the surface. It had landed on a broken walkway, its package still intact. A figure approached, small, hesitant, wearing a gray survival coat. Ren Voss knelt beside the drone and unwrapped the white cloth. The card inside was plain, unmarked except for a single word. She read it. She touched her chest where the silver pendant hung. Her mother had not said, "I love you." She had not said, "I'm coming." She had said, "Noted." That was the word that meant everything was being handled. That was the word Ren had heard in her mother's voice, through static on the few occasions they had spoken over the years. It meant, "I see you. I am preparing. Wait." Ren looked up at the sky. The dark shape was still there. She did not know what her mother was preparing for. She only knew that the word had arrived. She tucked the card into her coat and walked back to the shelter entrance. Kalith Voss walked to her private quarters. The chamber was small, bare, functional. A desk, a chair, a single window that looked out on the council station's docking ring. She sat down and removed her silver ring. She held it in her palm, turning it in the light. The ring had been on her finger for 11 years. It had been on her daughter's finger before that, when Ren was too young to wear it safely. Kalith had taken it when she left for the diplomatic corps, promising to return it when she came back. She had not come back. She had not been able to. She thought about the day she had put the ring on. Ren had been 3 years old, sitting on a bench at the Earth Coalition's departure hub. She had asked her mother why she had to leave. Kalith had knelt down and said, "Because someone has to listen. The galaxy is talking. I need to know what it says." She had not understood then how long the listening would take. She had not understood that the silence would become a habit, a fortress, a language of its own. She had not understood that she would stop speaking above a whisper, because whispering was the only thing that felt honest. She put the ring back on. The band was warm. The warmth meant nothing. It was just her skin, but she felt it anyway. Thessaly sat alone in her chambers. The recordings from the Selvoreth system were still playing on her display. She had watched the drone deployment 17 times. She had watched the Vrethkai withdrawal 4 times. She had watched Kalith Voss walk out of the council chamber at least a dozen times. She opened the old file again, the one she had pulled up earlier. The pattern was clear. The humans had always waited until the math was perfect. They had always struck exactly once, but she had missed something. She had missed the part where they never stopped listening. She scrolled to the bottom of the file. There was an addendum dated 47 years ago. It had been appended by an unknown user. The note read, "The resonance protocol will continue logging distress signals. The count will be higher. The response will be faster. The galaxy will learn to ask differently." Thessaly closed the file. She understood now. The humans had not built a weapon. They had built a system of response. The consequence was one component. The drones were another. The protocol was the ear that had listened for 47 years, and somewhere in the dark there were more components waiting. She sat in the dark and thought about what it meant to be part of a galaxy that had just been reclassified. On the Consequence Bridge, Commander Aris received a message. It was from the Pale Witness Asterisk. The observer ship had moved closer, its transponder now broadcasting a full identification. The captain's voice came through the speaker. "Commander, we have completed our recording of the engagement. We are transmitting a copy to your secure storage. We also have a message for Ambassador Voss." Aris nodded, "Forward it." The message was short, a single line text only. "The protocol is ready. The count is higher. We will continue listening. We await further instruction." Aris read the message twice. She did not know who had sent it. She only knew that the Pale Witness had been at the edge of the system for 4 decades, and that the resonance protocol had never been a diplomatic project. It had been a long-term survey, an intelligence archive, a map of the galaxy's pain, and now that map had been used. She closed the message and turned back to her display. The drone had returned to the ship. The Vrethkai flagship was still holding position in the outer system. The planet below was silent. The siege was over. Druoth Salkai submitted his resignation to the council. It was a short document, barely a page. It did not blame anyone. It did not make excuses. It simply stated that he had been wrong about a species, a conflict, and a galaxy. He requested reassignment to a research post. He did not expect it to be granted. He sat in his quarters staring at the window. The stars had not changed. The cold light was the same, but the galaxy had changed. It had become a place where a single whisper could reshape a campaign, a place where patience was not weakness but preparation, a place where the answer to a distress signal was not aid but consequence. He took off his bronze armor. He set it on the chair beside him. The metal felt old. It felt like a record of mistakes he had not known he was making. He picked up his display. He opened the file marked Selvoreth Incident Full Report Asterisk. He scrolled to the bottom. The final note was the same one he had read earlier. "The resonance protocol continues listening. The count is higher now." He did not wonder what the count was. He already knew. It was everything. Every distress signal, every call for help, every moment of suffering the galaxy had broadcast into the dark. The humans had been recording all of it, and they had been waiting. He closed the file and sat in silence. Kalith Voss stood at her window. She had not left her quarters for several hours. The silver ring was still on her finger. She touched it now, the familiar habit that had carried her through 11 years of diplomatic silence. Her comm unit beeped, a message from Selvoreth. She opened it, A short video. The picture was grainy, taken on a handheld recorder. The face that appeared was young, nervous, but unmistakable. Ren. "Mom, I got the card. I know what it means." "I'm fine. The bombardment stopped. Someone came, I don't know who, but they stopped it. I thought you should know." The video ended. Kayla watched it 3 times. Then she closed the comm unit and touched her ring. She did not smile. She did not cry. She simply stood at the window and looked at the dark and let the silence hold her. The consequence held its position for another hour. Commander Aris prepared the ship for departure. The Vrethkai flagship had not moved. The asterisk pale witness had withdrawn to the outer system. The drones were re-racked. The engines were warm. There was no reason to stay. She opened a channel to the surface. The signal was weak, but it reached the shelter where Ren Voss was waiting. "This is the consequence. We are departing. The system is clear. You are safe." Ren looked up at the sky. The dark shape was starting to move. She touched her pendant and said, "Thank you." The channel closed. The consequence turned and began its slow acceleration out of the system. The Vrethkai flagship did not follow. The galaxy held its breath. Thessaly watched the recording one last time. The drones deployed. The siege collapsed. The word was whispered. She closed the file and stood up. She walked to her window, the same window she had looked through for 600 years. The stars were still there. The galaxy was still turning. But something had shifted. A species that had spent 47 years listening had finally answered the phone. And the answer had not been aid. It had been architecture. She thought about the silver ring. She thought about the ambassador who had worn it for 11 years, never raising her voice, never threatening, never demanding. She thought about the whisper that had spoken 5 words and ended a siege. The galaxy would never be the same, not because the humans had won. They had not won anything. They had simply shown the galaxy what it meant to be dangerous. She sat down and began to write her own report. It would be long, it would be careful, it would be true. The consequence reached the system boundary. Commander Aris looked back at the planet. It was a small blue dot now, fading into the dark. She knew that the ship would not return. Its job was done. The next call would come from somewhere else. She opened the secure channel to Kayla's personal comm. "Ambassador. We are clear, awaiting further instruction." Kayla's whisper came through. "Return to Jupiter's 67th. Replenish. Wait." "Understood." The channel closed. Aris turned to her display and set the course. The hull of the consequence had been dark when it arrived. It was dark now as it left. No lights, no transponder, no emissions for anyone to track. It moved through the black like a shape that had never been there. But the galaxy had seen it. The records had been logged. The word had been spoken. And somewhere in the dark between stars, a listening array was still receiving signals. Kayla sat in her empty quarters, touching her silver ring. She did not speak. She did not need to. The ring had done its work. The word had been delivered. The consequence had been demonstrated. She looked at the window. The stars were cold and countless, but one of them held her daughter. One of them held a shelter where a girl had kept a promise. She closed her eyes and let the silence settle around her like armor. The comm unit was silent. The galaxy was listening.